Hi everybody, welcome to the first Building Basics. My name is Alex, and today we're building this. This is a strategy game cube, and it's a nice, simple build, perfect for our first model together. So we're going to build the cube, we're going to add material, give it a simple lighting setup, and then we're going to animate it together as well. Building Basics is an entry-level Blender tutorial series aimed to give you the skills to produce your final image. One thing to note is, even though it's an entry level and a beginner's tutorial, I don't cover the pure basics all the time. For that, go over to my Basics for Blender tutorial, where I go through the interface, go through the 3D viewport, the options, the hotkeys, and the way I like to set things up. So go over there, check that out, and then come on over here and go through the different episodes, the different builds that I go through. Follow along so you can improve as well. So let's jump in. Okie dokie, so you can see that my scene is blank. When you start your scene up for the first time, it's gonna have three things in the 3D viewport. It's gonna have the camera, the cube, and it's gonna have a light. So if you wanna delete those, you can hit A. You can hit A and select all, and then hit X to delete. Perfect. So here we go. I'm gonna go Shift A, Mesh, Cube. And what we want to do first is we want to round these corners off. We want to make them smooth. A couple ways to do that. We're going to use a modifier. So we're going to come on over here to our modifier properties, and we're going to click on Bevel. You can see already we've just smoothed this out a little bit. If we come on over here, add more segments, we smooth it out even more. Perfect. Next thing we got to do is, you can see the color shape in here. We want, it actually goes into the circle, into the cube itself. And so that's what we're going to do. In order to do that, we're going to create a new shape, Shift A, Cylinder. Perfect. Let's go to 7, which is our 7 on the numpad, which is our top view. And we're going to hit S to scale it in. Something like this I think works well. I'm looking at that edge in relationship to the bevel that we just created, and I think that looks good. Something like that. Okay, and we're gonna pull this up. And the way I use my translate tool, you can see you have them here on the left side. If you don't, just hit T to bring up your tools menu. And in here you have translate, rotate, and scale. You also have your select tool, very important. But I don't like using those. What I like to do is hit spacebar, and then you get this menu. You get those options that you have in your tool. This is your tool option, and then you can see the hotkey there. So what I like to do is spacebar G and just kind of in one action bring it up. And then I like to actually use the axis control to pull it more accurately. Okay, so we're going to pull this up a little more. And we're going to go into edit mode. Right now we're in object mode. You can see when I'm selecting something, it's highlighting orange, so I'm selecting that object. If we come on over here, that means I'm in object mode. I can also go to edit mode. Then I can affect the model within, not just the shape, and move it around. So the hotkey for that is Tab. And when you're in edit mode, you have 3 ways to edit your geometry. You can do vertex, which are these dots. You can do edges, which is, if you hit 2, that's edge. 1 is vertex, 2 is edge, 3 is face. And an edge is 2 points between the vertices. That line is called an edge. And then a face is when there's 3 or more edges connected together. That's a face. So 3 ways to affect the model. Okay, so I'm going to go to 2 to select edges. I'm just going to box select all those bottom rings there. I'm going to hit Control B, and we're going to bevel. Perfect, I think that looks good. Tab to get out of edit mode, back into your object. And now I can affect the whole object. And I'm just going to pull that down, just like that, just before it crashes there, that top row there. Okay, so let's select our cube. Come on over here, I can minimize this bevel modifier, and I'm gonna add a new bevel. And it's called a boolean. And a boolean, you can even see it by that shape there. A a boolean, I'm going to use one shape, the cylinder, to cut into the cube to cut out that shape. So I can go over here to Object and select the cylinder, come here to our outliner and hide the visibility of that cylinder. And now we have that cutout, just like our model here. So the next thing we got to do is do it for all sides of that cube. And the easiest way I think to do that is to show your cylinder, select the cylinder, and let's go back into edit mode. Tab, hit A to select all, and Shift D to duplicate. Right click to cancel its movement so it goes back to where it was duplicated from. And now we're going to rotate so then we can put it on all 6 sides. So here we go. You can see that my pivot is in the center of the cylinder, and I actually want it to be right here where this bullseye looking thing is, right there. That's called the cursor. So I'm going to come up here and put my pivot to 3D cursor. And all of a sudden it dropped it down there. I'm going to get my rotate tool and pick an axis and go 90 degrees. Type in 90. Perfect. Let's select A again, Shift D, duplicate, right click to cancel, and let's rotate it again 180. Perfect. Let's select just one edge or one vertex or one face of one of the 4 cylinders, hit L, hovering above it, and that just selects the geometry in its entirety without being connected to other parts of the geometry. So that's what L does. And I'm going to Shift D this one, right click, and let's go down another axis and go 90, Shift D one last time, right click, and 180. So now I'm on all 6 sides. I'm going to hit Tab to go back into object mode. Let's hide the visibility. And we've just achieved that fairly quickly. I think it looks pretty cool. You can see if I zoom in a little bit, it's a little jaggedy. It's not as smooth as the real life model. So let's fix that. Okay, so here's what we can do. Show the cylinder one more time. We could add a subdivision surface modifier and really smooth it out. I'm not going to. I'm going to keep this model simpler. So that means less density, less geometry. What I can do, and this works as well, is right click and just do shade smooth. Now if we hide this, it looks different, but the line is a little smoother. So I like that, and I'll show you how we can get back to adding that definition to the cube. Okay, so here's what we're going to do now. If I select the cube, and you can see that in my properties over here, under the modifiers, I have 2 modifiers, the bevel and the boolean. But if I tab into edit mode on my cube, those things go away. So a modifier is a non-destructive way of manipulating your object. And that's good, but sometimes you need to actually work with the things you want to on your actual geometry. So we call that applying the modifier. So if you tab back out, I would start with the top one. Go to this drop down and say apply. Go to this one and apply. Doesn't look any different, but now if we tab into it, you can see the geometry actually has the representation of the visuals that we had before. So now it's applied to that model. Perfect. So here's what we're going to do now. We have 2 more steps, then the model's done. So if I tab out, you can see it's not defined in terms of how it looked before. So that's what I want to achieve now. So I'm going to tab back in, and I'm going to hit 2, make sure I'm an edge select. And I'm going to select one of these edges, one of the around the ring, and with Shift Alt select another edge. You can see that it selected that ring, and then it got interrupted there. So I'm going to Shift Alt click, and it finished that ring. I'm going to come on the inside and finish that selection. So now go to all the rest of the 5 sides and do the same thing here. Shift Alt click, click, and click. And we're just going to select all those edges. Okie dokie, so I've selected everything. And now what we're going to do is add that bevel. So Control B. And just drag it out and then bring it back. And now once you found kind of the distance you want, you can hit Shift. That slows things down. And something like this I think looks good. Cool, let's tab out. And now you can see the definition is back in the model. Last thing we're going to do is right click, shade smooth, and this model itself is done. So nice job if you've gotten up to this point. Let's add some materials. So what we want to do is we have our model. We're going to come over here. Right now we're in shaded mode. So we're just seeing different levels of shades. Over here we can see our textures and our materials. Okay, so now we're going to go to our materials property, this cool looking beach ball. Click on that and we're going to click plus and new. Awesome. So I'm going to just name this white, and we have 4 materials on our cube here. We have the white, red, blue, yellow. So we're gonna add 4 materials. Perfect. So we've added the first one, and you can see if you go to base color, you can already change the color. So that's really cool. If you want to go back to the grayscale here, the quickest way I found is just go all the way to black, scroll off that, and then click back in, and now you're on the grayscale again. So let's go to white. Perfect. I'm going to tab into my model, make sure I'm on 3 for faces. I'm just going to select this face, come on, this face, and this face, the 2 opposites. And now what we can do is hit Control plus, and that grows our selection. Let's come on over here, hit plus and new, and I'm going to say the red. Let's just add all the other colors, new, blue, and yellow. Perfect. Okay, let's just give all those colors. So yellow, blue, and red. You can always change the colors after, so you don't feel like you're stuck with what you have. Let's change the colors here. So I'm going to select the face, go to this opposite, select that. Now hit Control plus, grow that selection. And now let's assign the red color to those faces and assign. You can only assign this way when you're in edit mode. So now let's come in over here, select this face, go to its opposite, select this face, and Control plus twice to grow that selection. Let's go to blue and assign. Let's tab out. And all of a sudden, we have that cube. Very cool. There's one last thing I want to do, and when I'm looking at my model, it's shinier on the white part than it is on the color as well. So I'm gonna affect that right here. Click on the white material, and if you scroll down, there's a roughness property. If you go all the way to the bottom, you can see it turns it more into a mirror or a glass. And that's too reflective, so we're going to pull that back. If you go the other way, there's no reflectivity. I think somewhere around 0.2 in that area I think is nice. Okay, so the model itself is done. Let's pull this model just up 1 unit. So I'm going to, with it selected, I'm going to hit Control and drag it up, and it brings it up 1 unit. Okie dokie. So let's add a lighting setup. And the lighting setup that we're going to do for this one is a simple HDR lighting setup. So what that means is that I'm going to use an image that's a 360-degree image, and I'm going to use the color from that image to affect the lighting in my scene. And then that way, we just hook it up and it's done. It gives you some nice results very quickly. So let's do that. Shift A, I'm going to just make a platform, so I'm going to judge if there's any shadows or bounce light. Nice and simple. Let's come on over here to our shading workspace. Perfect. And so if you select the model, you can see that material shows up. And over here, we're an object. If we go to the world, we get a different result. And let's switch up here. So here was our shading. Here's our materials and textures. And here's everything with the lighting. So we're going to be over here now. And if I go to this background color, when I'm in the world, I can affect the color which affects the lighting in that scene. Very cool. But like I said, I want to use an image to do that. So I'm going to go Shift A in this window, texture, and an environment texture. We're going to already hook that up. And everything turns purple. So what that means is that, remember, there was a color here, but now there's no color, there's an input. But there's no value in this input, so it represents it as purple. So let's go find an image. Open and navigate to where you have your HDRI images. So here's a folder that I have, and I'm going to leave a link in the description to where you can download these images. The best place and where I went is a website called HDRI Haven, and they have great images, and they're free, and they have a whole bunch of different resolutions. So go check them out and use their resource. So I've downloaded a couple, and typically I like this one, so let's keep going with that one. Open. Just gives a nice soft, different kind of colors to the picture, which then again affects the lighting in that scene. Now, one other thing is obviously it brings in the image. Sometimes you want it, most times I say you don't want it. So the way we affect that is we're going to go to our render properties up here at the top, go to film, go to transparent. It just turns that off. Okay. One other thing we want to do just to finish the rendering portion is we're going to come on over here and we're going to change the render engine from EV. We're going to go to cycles. So a render engine is just how it computes the output, the final image. EV is a fast, real-time engine, and cycles renders it out differently and with higher quality, okay? And the reason I like cycles, it already just includes that shadow at the bottom and just bounce lighting if you have it. And again, it depends on the HDRI image you have in your scene, just how bright it is and etc. the colors. Okay, let's do a couple things here just to speed up our render. So if we go to device, CPU is going to go to GPU compute. Hopefully your computer supports that. That really increases the speed. Under sampling, we have viewport and we have render. So we have 1K, which is 1024, and 4K. We're going to really tone those down here. So for my viewport max samples, I'm just going to go all the way down to 8. Boop. It still looks fine to me. For my 4K image, way too high, I'm just going to take it all the way down to 32. So that means I'm going to render much faster. And that's it. That's basically my settings. Okay, so let's go to my animation workspace and let's do an animation together. Here we go. I'm going to pull this window. I'm going to pull this up a little bit so I have more real estate here. This is our dope sheet, which I don't use. So I'm going to go to our graph editor, and that's the window I prefer. I'm also going to pull our timeline up, so now I can scrub here on our timeline. Okay, that's how I set my animation workspace. Actually, I'm almost done. Here, over here is our 3D workspace. Is where I like to work. So I'm going to turn these on, so when I select it, I can actually see my translate tools and my manipulation tools. But I don't want to see it over here. So I'm going to scroll over here on the top with middle mouse, and I'm just going to show my color. But I'm going to click these other icons so I can just focus on my image. Last thing we got to do is bring in a camera. Shift A, camera. So hit 0 on your numpad, and that takes you into the camera view. From here, I can just zoom in a little bit. Perfect, just to make my image larger. Hit N, bring up your properties there, and let's go to view. And we're going to click this on camera to view. And what that allows you to do is frame within your camera viewport. And that itself is very powerful. And it's a nice little button where you can click in and out, view, camera to view. Okay, so one of the things with the camera selected, I'm going to come on over here. If you don't have it selected, go to your outliner, select the camera, come on, come to this camera icon, and then there's a property here that's viewport display, and I'm just going to make that 0.99. That just darkens everything, but I can still see the edge of what's outside of the field of view. Okay, so here's what I'm imagining for the animation. Someone threw this cube. I could say I threw this cube in one shot. I just threw it in a direction, and then we cut to the shot we're going to create now. And this cube is going to come from off screen, just going to come across screen and hit something and just land on the table. So that's what we're going to do for the animation. And so we need something for our hero cube to hit. So I'm going to go Shift A, Mesh, and I'm going to create another cube. So I'm going to hit S and scale this up to 2. Perfect. Also, I'm going to show my casting, my keys over here, so you can see what I'm doing. Okay, and let's make it bigger on this one axis. And I'm going to hit 2 again. Awesome. And let's pull it up, and we want to put it on the ground. And an easy way to do that, you can see that my pivot's still at the cursor where we left it. But now I can come in over here and go to individual origin. Brings it back to where I would expect it to be. Awesome. One other thing we can do to bring it on the ground plane is before, when we hit control, you can see I'm snapping to units, to unit heights. But if we come in over here, I can snap to vertex, to different vertices. So with that axis selected, I'm going to hit control and then just bring my cursor to any corner that I want, any vertex, and then it snaps it to that height. Okay, so let's also show my color over here. And let's just put that over there. And now what we're doing is we're setting up our staging. Staging is the relationship of your hero, character, or object in relation to other characters, objects, or the environment. So the environment in this case is very simple. It's just a ground plane, and it's that cube. And it's that relationship of everything. And we're trying to make it as aesthetically pleasing as we can. So I have the ground plane. I'm going to hit Tab to go into edit mode, 3 for faces, and E to extrude. Just going to give that a little bit of depth. And while we're here, let's give it a small bevel. Tab out. We can come in over here, and we can just add a small little bevel. And I'm going to make that even a little smaller. Cool. And now we're going to affect the framing. So we have our staging. Now it's time to frame. So thinking about the animation again, for this shot, it comes into frame and it's going to hit the cube. That's the point of contact. So I'm going to start by just bringing our hero cube over there. Boop. Bring it right to where it touches. And I'm going to add some rotation as well, so it's not perfectly flat. I'm going to rotate it towards camera a little bit. Right now we're on the world orientation. So if you can see that even though the cube is facing in one direction, my arrows is facing straight up. Sometimes that's what you want, sometimes that's not what you want. You can change that right here. So I'm in global, you can go to local. So now let's affect the rotation. Perfect, something like this I think looks good. And right to the point of contact, and I'm going to crash into that a little bit. I don't mind. I think that looks really good. So there is my point of contact. Now I can more accurately frame for this action. How I'm going in and out from one window back into the 3-panel window is with a hotkey that I set up. It's Alt Q. But I show that in that beginner's tutorial where I go over hotkeys and my preferences. So go check that out if you're interested, and then come back to this tutorial and to the other tutorials in the series. Okay, so I think we're about ready here. I'm gonna decrease our frame. So here we have a start frame of 1, perfect. Let's really bring this down to 96, which is 4 seconds. We can zoom in over here just to widen things out. And the framing's not done here. So I'm giving a lot of negative space to screen right so that action can come in. And how I envision it is it comes in, let me show you over here. Let me grab this guy. So what I envision is that it's just going to come in like this, doink. It's going to bounce up, doink, 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 and settle somewhere around there. Okay, so with my camera, knowing what I want to do for the action, I'm just going to give the screen space in. Flat is kind of cool. I do want a little bit of depth though. Okay, I think this is going to look good. Something like this. There it is. Okay, so now what we can do, and I can always adjust the framing after, I'm going to hit N and turn this off, camera to view. Now I can't accidentally knock that framing out of its position. 0 on the numpad to get back into my camera. And now we can start our animation. So let's select that cube. And what we want to do is pick a frame. Where is it going to contact? That's where I'm going to start this animation, on the point of contact. And how I know what frame to start on is typically you want about 6 to 8 frames of nothing to happen on screen, and then the action happens. And that's so our eye, when we cut to a new shot, has a little bit of time to orient ourselves with the different colors and pictures. So that's the reason. So here we go. I'm going to pick frame 15. I'm going to hit I, and I'm going to do location rotation. That inserts a key on those values. Perfect. And you can see down here we have this cool diamond shape. That's a keyframe. And then in our graph editor, we also have that represented. Okay. So what that does, again, just saves its position in space at that point in time. Let's bring it back, maybe 10 frames, and let's pull it out. I'm going to go over here to global, so it just goes down one axis. Boop! Makes it easy. Perfect. And let's affect the rotation as well. Let's just turn it around, give it some cool rotation so the animation is not so stale. Now in our graph editor, you can hit A, period numpad. So A selects all and period numpad frames for it. So here we go. We have our keyframes right here. 1 keyframe, 2 keyframes. You can also see them down here. And over here, when you select one of the keyframes, you get these orange things on this side, and then you get these orange kind of circles on that side. What those are handles. Handles are a way to manipulate the curve, which then manipulates how fast something comes in and out of that keyframe. That keyframe is just a pose in time. And so what I'm going to do is select A to select all, V is your interpretation, and I'm going to go make it vector. Vector just makes it linear, straight lines. Okay, so we're at this point in time, and then we're at this point in time. That's how easy it is, and it's a linear move, so it's the spacing between them is the same throughout. Let's actually come in over here and make this shorter. And so I have that hotkey which goes into the view, so I do that a lot. And then I also set up another hotkey which I show in that other tutorial, which plays my animation. So what I'm doing is just looking at the speed of things. Cool, and I think it looks good. I think that's gonna work. Last thing I'm gonna do is just pull it up a little bit. So it's just not a straight line, it's coming down into that. Just like that. Perfect. Key it. And if you want auto key, here's the button for auto key. You can click that, and basically what it does is every time you make an adjustment, you don't have to hit I all the time, it just auto keys it. And I use that a lot. In this case, I'll just keep it simple and key it ourselves. Okay, one last thing is I can delay the height fall. So you can see over here we have translate Z is our up and down axis. I can come in over here, Z location. With that selected, Shift H, A, select all, period number pad, just to show everything. So you can see over here, I can just pull this up in the graph editor, and it affects our image, our cube. So I'm going to go V with this one key selected, the first one, and hit auto clamp. And what that's going to do is just going to hold it there and come down. Almost, you know, treating it like gravity coming down in an arc. Perfect. Okay, so the next thing we want to do when thinking about animation and the best way to approach it, you can do something that's called straight ahead, or you can do blocking. And that's what we're doing here. And when you're blocking something out, you want to think of extreme poses. So here, the first one that I did is the contact. That's the most extreme. The next most extreme is the next contact on the ground. So we're going to skip all this time and just go to that point. So I think a good amount of time, so we're at frame 15. If I go to frame 25, that's 10 frames. If I go to frame 27, that's 12 frames between the two keys. 12 frames is half a second. So half a second for it to bounce off the thing and hit the table or the ground, whatever it is. Half a second. I might give it a little more time, so 2 more frames. Here we go. So we're going to pull this cube, boop, and just bring it back and down. We're also going to rotate it so it doesn't look stiff. So it's just rotating back, and there we go. It's going to hit maybe on the point, just like that. I'm going to crash into the ground a little bit, but not that much. Something like this. I do want a little crashing, but just not so much. Key, location, rotation. And in the graph editor, you can see I have just that one axis selected. So what I can do is hit Alt-H here, shows everything again. I can hit A to select all, period numpad to frame for everything. And so the interpolation of these keys are linear, and the one that we just set is, you can see, it's clamped. So I'm going to hit V and make that vector as well. Okay, so let's play what we have. Cool. So it looks a little weird because it just goes into that position, but I'm not worried. What I'm looking for is just the hit, and is that enough rotation? And it might be. I might give it just a little more rotation. And G, just to crash it in, and I to update that. Cool, I think that's better. It's a little more dramatic, it's a little more violent, and I think it's more appropriate because that head's pretty big. Okay, so what we have so far is we have frame 15, which is our first keyframe, marking that position in time and in space, and I went over and hit it another keyframe. This first key just gets us into this pose, this one here. So now what we're going to do is an in-between frame, an in-between key. And an in-between key, the purpose of that is to define the arc of an action. So here is the two keys, and I'm going to go somewhere in the middle, and all I'm going to do is pull it up. And that's going to define the arc of that, in this case the cube. And I'm going to hit location just to key it. Let's now watch it. Doink. Cool. I think that looks good. Just going to pull it down a little. I thought it was a bit too high. And there we go. Okay, let's keep going. Let's give ourselves a few more frames here. And now the next extreme pose is the next contact. So here we are at frame 29, and maybe I'll come down to frame 37, 8 frames apart now. Pull it over here, it's going to continue its movement, perfect. And it's also going to continue its rotation in that direction. So it's just rotating, and maybe I'm changing just kind of the shape. Oh, that's kind of nice. Maybe instead of hitting a point, I'll have it hit an edge now. Just like that. Cool. Let's crash it into the ground a little bit. Boop. Awesome. And the reason we crash it in is just so we can make sure it actually contacts, and the shadows are going to look a little better. I to insert location rotation to key it, and same thing, we're going to zoom out, select this key and vector. Let's play it again. Cool. Doink, doink. And same thing, it looks a little strange because there's no in-between key. So all we're going to do is raise that up, and we're going to do it now. So here's the two keys. Go in the middle and pull it up. Boop. Something like that. And key location. Cool. We're going to have the next keyframe, the next extreme pose, is again the next landing. So here we had 8 frames between this key, and this ones are in between. It was 8 frames. Now I might do something like 6 frames. So 37, I might go to 43, and that might be our next landing pose, somewhere around there. And it's rotating. And this time it's much more simple. Maybe I'll have it kind of just... let's keep it simple. Let's still have it on its edge. Perfect. I like that. Cool. Location rotation with I just to key it. I like that. Let's select that key. Hit V for vector to make it linear. Let's watch it. Yeah. Awesome. And last thing, let's go in the middle of these two keys and add an in-between pose. Again, an in-between just defines that arc a little better. Boop, just a little bit, doesn't need much. Key location. Okay, so now I think I'm ready for that last landing. And here we go, frame 43. I'll just go 4 frames. And what we're gonna do is just try to get it flat on the surface. So let's just rotate it, bring it down. And I'm gonna make it flat. I'm in the geometry itself. I'm holding shift now just to slow the rotation or any movement. And there we go, I like that. I think that looks good. So let's key it. And I'm gonna go back to my global. And it still needs to move in that direction. Something like that. So from this key to its original, it just kind of lands into that position. Maybe a little more. Boop. And this is, again, going to be vector. Awesome, let's just play what we have. Cool. And this one is a bit soft. It doesn't hit as hard as I think it could. So let's just select this key and pull it in 1. The tighter the timing, the faster the action. Cool. And last thing I want to do when it hits, I think it can still have a little bit of movement, a little dirtiness, a little something to it. So it doesn't just hit and die. It hits and maybe just kind of has something. So that's what we're going to do now. Coming over here and let's key it. Key location rotation. Pull it just a little more. Perfect. And then I'm going to come, this one actually could remain flat. So now it eases into that. And maybe I'm going to have a little bounce up. So here we go. I'm going to pull this up just a little bit and rotate it back just a little bit. Cool. Let's see what that looks like. Doink, doink. It's a little much, so I'm going to tone that down, but I like the idea. Cool. Nice. Let's make this vector. Boop. And let's try making this a little sharper. Cool. I'm also going to pull this in just a little bit. Oh yeah, that's a little better. Just a little sharper. And then that's it. The cube is done moving. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into our graph editor, and on the y-axis location, or on the y translate axis, I'm going to make sure that's flat tangent. So let's go over here to our y location, Shift H, select all, period, just to zoom in there, and let's select those last keys. And so if I select this last key on that curve, you can see it's just that forward momentum. I'm just going to make this with V flat tangent. Okay. Nice. So our animation for the cube is done. What we're going to do is animate the larger box so then it has a little bit of impact, it has a little bit of movement, and then we'll render this. So what we're going to do is come over here, select our big box now, and when the small cube hits the big box, I want it to pivot from the bottom and just have a little bit of impact movement. So with the box selected, let's hit Tab to get into edit mode, hit 2, and select that bottom edge right there. Perfect. We're going to hit Shift S. Shift S is a pie menu that allows you to set where your cursor is or where your selection wants to go. So I'm going to go right here, cursor, which is that cool bullseye looking thing, to selected. So it went from over here to over here, that cursor. Perfect. So I'm going to hit Tab to get out, coming up here, and go back to cursor where your pivot's going to pivot from. So now I can pivot from that position. Okay, let's go to frame 15, which was our impact pose. Let's key it with I, location, rotation, and maybe we'll go over 8 frames. 15, we'll go to frame 23, and we'll just pull this back, just like that. Okay. We're going to select that first keyframe, hit V, and we're going to make it linear. So when it hits, it's sharper, the movement. We're going to select that back key, go V, and go auto clamp. And what that does is if we zoom in there to our Y location, Shift H just to hide that axis, A to select. So you can see when it hits, it's sharper, and then it's going to slide into its final position softer. Okay, let's see what that looks like. Cool. And then the other thing I'm going to do, I can probably make it just even a little sharper. There we go. The next thing we're going to do is add that rotation up. So I'm going to come on over here, frame 15. Maybe by frame 20, it's back on the ground. It didn't rotate much up. So I'm going to go I'm going to key the rotation. We don't see anything here. I'm going to do Alt H just to show everything. And 2 frames after that impact, I'm just going to rotate it back just like that. Maybe too much. There it is. I to also key the rotation again. Perfect. And then let's go into our X rotation. Select that. Shift H. A to select. Period numpad. So it hits hard and then it comes back on the ground. Now when it comes on the ground, you can see it's easing into that. We don't want that. We want it to land on the ground harder. So I'm going to go V and vector. I can even make it a little sharper there. Okay, so I like that. Let's see what that looks like. Perfect, that's it. We don't need much more. Okay, I'm going to now, before I render this, I'm going to look at my framing one last time. What I don't like is, especially that the cube, our hero, is so close to the edge of frame. And also right here, this box is a bit too close as well. So I'm going to adjust that now. Let's go N, back to camera to view. And in our last framing, I'm just going to adjust my framing. Cool, I think something like this, keeping it nice and simple, is good. Just even giving that gap between that edge. They're not competing now, they're not in tension with each other. Perfect, I like it. We'll do this. So hit N again, turn that off so I can't accidentally knock my framing around. The last thing I want to do before we render is the background. I want to think about the colors. So one thing, I'm looking at the cube, the box here, the ground plane, and my cube. They're competing in terms of color with the white here. So I'm going to select this, go to Materials Properties, add a new one, and we're going to call this gray. And just don't make it so bright. Perfect. And select the ground plane. Coming over here, we're going to hit that same gray material. Now our hero cube stands out more. Okay, let's go Shift A, and we're going to add a mesh plane. Really scale that up. Rotate and 90 degrees, and just pull that back into the distance, something like that. You can see our pivot's still now at the cursor, so I'm just going to change that to its origin, its individual origin. All I want to do is just get that into position, and I basically want a card back there, so it's not an environment or anything like that. And now I can control this card. I can add a color. I'm going to say new, and pick any color you want, anything that you think looks good. Let's see, what do I like here? Yeah, there we go. Something like this for myself. I'm going to go now to our lighting setup. So here we had our grays, our shading mode. Here we can add our textures and material. And now it's our render. Okay, so what I'm going to do is go Shift A. And we're going to add a light, area light. Really scale that up. If you don't see your lights in here, go to this drop-down menu and just click on Extras. Lights fall under that category, Extras. Okay, so what we're going to do with the light is just pull it over here and we're going to bounce it off the card and rotate it so that it's facing the card. Come on. There we go. And in our properties for the light, under power, just add a couple more zeros. There we go, added another 0. And what that does is just creates a gradient fall off. And I like it when it's not one harsh color and there's a little bit of a fall off. Okay, so I like that. It's just something that breaks up that background a little bit. Okay, I'm going to duplicate this light. I'm going to go Shift D with it selected, right click to cancel its movement, and I'm just going to point it towards my model now. I'm going to scale that down a little bit and rotate it over here. Come on. And I just want a little bit of shine, a little bit of even shadow coming up on my hero cube there. Perfect. Let's pull it up a little bit. And we're just going to aim it to our cube there. You can see we're getting a little bit of highlight. Let's add another 0 under power. That's really going to shine now. And I think that looks good. We're adding more contrast to our picture. If you think that's too strong, you can always tone that down. And what we can do is even select our material, and under roughness, we can make it more rough. So here we have a glass material. That actually looks really cool. I actually really like that for the ground. Okay, we're going to do that, but I don't like the reflectivity on the box. So I'm going to select the box. I'm going to go plus, new, and it's not going to be reflective. Oops, let's go like this. And it's maybe going to have a little bit of a brown color. And now we don't see it right now, so we're going to hit F here to frame for it, Tab 3 to select the faces, A to select all, and assign. There we go. And let's give this a little bevel too. I think that's feeling lonely. So modifiers, let's give it a small little bevel and just increment the segments a bit. Okay. I think we're ready to render. I think this looks pretty cool. I think the animation looks good. One thing I don't like as I'm seeing it now is I can see the top of that color. So I'm going to affect my framing quickly because I do want to see that. So I'm going to select my camera, frame for it, and I'm just going to pull it up from here. Just like that. Now I can see a little bit of that top face a little more. I think that looks better. And then I'm going to, with that selected, I'm going to frame down. I'm going to pan down. Just like that. Okay. So there is our framing. I think that looks cool. And now let's do our render settings. So we did most of them already. We did all these. We did the our samples. Let's give a quick render test. So on your keyboard, hit F12, which runs. Oh, we have one issue, which is these cylinders that we made, but it gives it a render test. And you can see even at that sample, that low sample, I think the image looks pretty good. So let's hit escape to cancel or to get out of that. And what that is over here, the cylinders, is this cylinder that we hid. We're going to still hide them, but we're also going to click this button so we don't render them. Let's hit F12 one more time. Yeah, I think this looks really cool. I really like the reflectivity actually on the surface, just that bounce. And so this frame took 4.47 seconds, 4.5 seconds to do this frame times, you know, we're going to maybe have, let's see, it settles. We're at, yeah, let's make it 60 frames. So there we go. So we're at our render properties. We're going to come down one to our output properties, and we're going to pick a location where we want to save it. So find somewhere where you want to save this video. And I'm going to go to cube, and I'm just going to call it test. Perfect. All right, so let's take a look at the render settings. I'm going to get out of the way here. And here's what I always set it at. So we did our output. The file format, I always go FFmpeg video. So I just make it a video. And the encoding, under container, I'll just pick QuickTime. And then the video codec, if it's not H.264, set it to that. Everything else stays the same. All right, let's render. So now we can come up here and render our animation. All right, so this is not going to take long. So I'll see you in just about 4 or 5 minutes, and then we'll have a look at the final product. Okay, see you in a second. All right, so here's the final result. I hope you enjoyed following along, and I hope you got some good value out of it. If you did manage to do the model, add the lighting and the texturing and the animation, and got to a final rendered result just like this, congratulations. It's not an easy thing to do, but I think you gained some valuable skills. So, I'll see you in the next video, and until then, bye-bye.